We are continuing our series on families, and it was just a few weeks ago our flyer advertising our series was published, placed on bulletin boards and maybe in the bulletin and all. And a few weeks ago when I was assigned my topic, I don't know whether I actually told Betty, I don't much think I did, what I was going to be speaking on. And so when she saw the flyer, she saw me speaking on having a godly fuss, she says, her interest was really piqued. She says, I want to hear this. So I need you to help me with something. Because she really wanted to hear this. She wanted to be in the assembly tonight. Perhaps she wanted to be able to make objection or, make some eyes signals, something, I don't know. But would you know, in our 30 years of marriage, this has never happened. She's not here tonight because she's having to work over until 7:30. Yeah. So sometimes we talk about God having a sense of humor. Sometimes we talk about the providence of God. So I think both of these are just kind of wrapped up into one. She's not here tonight, so yeah, you're right. Tonight we are talking about problem solving for families, having a godly fuss. I want to begin tonight by way of introduction, just to remind you, sometimes we can have some different ideas about marriage and family and the home, especially as we approach it as young people. We can have starry eyes and really some impressions and ideas that are not true to life. But you and I need to understand that there's no perfect couple. There's no perfect marriage. There is no perfect home. Of course, we know that in our spiritual lives, we're to be striving for perfection. And in the home, you and I should be striving for perfection too. Someone has suggested that a great marriage is not when the perfect couple comes together. It is rather when an imperfect couple learns to enjoy their differences. It's been said that opposites attract. And I suppose that to some extent that's the case. Opposites do attract. And so those opposites, maybe early on in courtship and marriage, they don't seem to be that significant. Something about that person kind of draws us together, but it can be that later on in the marriage, those differences may not so much attract, but maybe rather could repel just a little bit. We have different personalities, different temperaments. And so we've got to learn to appreciate and accept one another. Learn to accept each other in our styles and personality traits. We are imperfect people. All of us, some days are good days. And maybe those days that are good, it's not that difficult in our homes. But there are other days that can be more challenging. There are other days that, we just have a bad day. And maybe we're frustrated at work. There's all kinds of things that are going on in our lives. And the frustration can build and build till we can come to a tipping or a boiling point. Sometimes if we're not careful, we can begin to spill that over onto our mate or our children or maybe the dog or the pet in the home. This lesson tonight is both a reminder and a challenge for us to be pursuing on a daily basis God's ideal for marriage, as well as God's ideal for all the relationships that God has given to us. And so we want to be reminded that God has an ideal for us. God has a standard. And you and I need to go to the book to see how He wants us to live our lives as Christians. There's a particular passage in the Scripture where Jesus talks to His disciples that we need to be harmless as doves, be wise as serpents, and harmless as doves. You and I need to be pursuing God's ideal for marriage and the home. When we talk about families, we're talking about relationships. And we all have different kinds of relationships. We have the husband-wife relationship. We have parents and children relationships, sibling to sibling, and in-laws. grandparents, uncles and aunts, nieces and nephews. In the home, we have various relationships. We have those that are close and the extended family. The home was designed by God to be a unique haven, and haven for those who live within the home, providing peace and security from the outside world. The home is to be a haven of security. The home was never meant to be a war zone. As Christians, we're called upon to fulfill God's purpose for marriage in the home. I want to pause for just a moment here and exercise a word of caution for us. If we have children at home, we need to be very careful how we interact with our mate in front of our children. It's very important that we do not be bickering and speaking harmful words to one another, fussing and fighting in front of the children. That being said, maybe there is a sense in which our children need to hear us speaking to one another in those times that are a challenge. They need to learn how to communicate, how to be able to open up and to express themselves. You know, sometimes children, for instance, they're communicating in negative ways. Sometimes they might have a temper tantrum because they're not getting their way. And you and I, as parents, we need to be careful that we're not having a grown-up temper tantrum. You and I need to teach our children how to communicate and to express ourselves without having those negative words, those negative thoughts and things being spewed all over the place. We need to be careful about using our children as some kind of weapon against the other parent. So we should not have our children being caught in the middle, as this picture would indicate. The home was never meant by God to be a place of war. As we think about areas of potential conflict, and this is not an exhaustive list, but just 2 or 3 that I thought of off the top of my head. And one is in the area of money. In the area of money, money can be an area of conflict in the home. Sometimes there can be a mate who does not feel like that they don't have money to spend because maybe a husband is being very frugal and maybe is doling out precious little funds that the mate can spend through the course of the week. We need to be careful about being stingy, be careful about being selfish. And as I think about this point concerning money, with reference to inheritance, sometimes parents can be partial. It should never be the case, but sometimes parents can give more to one child than another, and oftentimes there's a lot of conflict that can arise in a family, separation, people wanting to speak to one another because they feel like that they were mistreated with reference to money matters. So as Christians, we need to use good judgment, we need to be fair, we need to be just concerning such matters pertaining to money. Also, sometimes there can be conflict in the home with reference to raising the children. These are matters that would well be discussed before marriage. But sometimes one parent is far more strict and another parent might be passive and might be not as strict. And so sometimes one parent might be more disciplinarian and maybe more with reference to corporal punishment, etc. And so these are matters that the husband and the wife, the father and the mother, need to be on the same page pertaining to. And so there's any number of matters with reference to raising children where conflict can arise. We need to be careful about that. Also with reference to intimacy. In 1 Corinthians chapter 7, Paul deals with the matter of intimacy and how that let each have his husband and wife, that there not be sexual immorality. He goes on to talk about how that in certain cases that there not be an agreement among husband and wife that they might want to give themselves for a period of time, temporarily speaking, for prayer and fasting. But then he says that you should, that should be a matter of agreement, and then come together again, lest Satan should tempt you. And so we've got to realize that in the area of sexuality, that this is an area where the evil one is working. The evil one is seeking to gain an advantage. We need to be careful lest we cause our mate to stumble in this regard. And so we should never use sexual intimacy as a weapon against our mate, as leverage to get, I'm wanting something, I'm wanting to buy something, I'm wanting to go somewhere, I'm wanting to do something, but you're not giving in. I'm not getting the concession I want. So because of that, then as far as I'm concerned, you can sleep on the couch tonight or in the guest bedroom. We should not use sexuality as a weapon or as a leverage against one another. Relationships often break down because of ungodly behavior, ungodly words by either a family member or family members together collectively. Relationships break down. One of the purposes of this study is to help us, to encourage us to be on guard, to be cautious, lest our relationships do break down. We want to have strong relationships in every sphere, in the church, in our church family, in our home. And so we've got to be careful about our behavior and our words. So tonight we're going to be looking at 2 or 3 things. We're going to be emphasizing. So we think about a godly fuss. What's involved in a godly fuss? We're talking about words. We're talking about emotions. And thirdly, we're going to be talking about our objective. And then we might give 2 or 3 suggestions as we close out. So let's talk about words first of all. Godly fuss. Problem solving for families, having a godly fuss. Communication. We're talking about words. We said that family equals relationships. Relationships involve communication. Communication between a husband and wife, it's been said, is like a river. When you are able to speak freely, openly, and constructively with your spouse, everything flows smoothly. So this should be our goal. As husbands and wives, as parents with reference to our children, the ideal is that you and I are able, in a kind and loving way, able to speak freely our thoughts, our ideas, our feelings. We need to be able to speak our feelings, again, being spoken in the right way. The other person needs to be willing to receive, to hear what we have to say. And so it needs to be like a river to flow smoothly. Let's think for just a moment about the phrase, the art of communication. The art, think about that, the art of communication. It is and has been described as an art. When we think about something being an art, oftentimes we think about something that it's taken for granted, that it's not that difficult, that sometimes we think communication generally, it's not an issue. It just happens naturally. Communication doesn't just happen by accident, does it? Communication is difficult. And oftentimes there's misunderstandings. And so sometimes we need to ask questions. And also be off to 7:30, Betty. 7:28, you're here. The art of communication. The art of communication. It's not easy. But it is an art. Sometimes it's like we can deal with like a bull in a drugstore. We just random, we just let it happen. But it is an art to it. You and I need to learn how to communicate. We need to guard against misunderstandings. And one of the ways we can do that is by asking questions. Communication is the lifeblood to healthy relationships. And that's my statement. We need healthy communication in order that we can promote healthy relationships. Often the biggest barrier to communication, this is something that Brother Glenn shared with me, is that often the biggest barrier to communication is the assumption that it's already taken place. We need to be careful about making assumptions. And we also need to remember that we're forgetful people in the Scripture. How many times are we reminded about certain things? Betty may have told me something a few weeks or months ago about her wishes, or maybe something she wanted for Christmas. I don't know, God. I'm sorry. And that's my fault. But I don't remember everything. And so we forget things. And so we need to be careful about assuming that such and such knows what I said about that last month. It may have already slipped my mind. And so we need to be careful about assuming that communication is taking place. It's a barrier. As we think about words tonight, let me suggest that we need to filter our words. Filter our words. We use filters, don't we? Downstairs at the sink, there's a filter for the water. Before we drink it, we want to make sure that there's nothing in there that we don't want to drink. Maybe particles, maybe something, of that sort. And so we run things through filter to purify and to make it clean. And so I want to suggest that you and I, we need to filter our words. Not just let our words flow random. We need to filter our words. We need to engage our minds and first think before we speak. As we think about this, we need to think about when to speak. We need to think about what words we're going to utilize. In Ecclesiastes 3 verse 7, the wise man pens these words, and you're familiar with this reading, how that there is a time for various things. And one is concerning our speaking. There is a time to tear, a time to sow. There is a time to keep silence and a time to speak. And sometimes in our relationships, whether it's with our children or with our parents, with each other as mates, sometimes it is judicious to pause and to say, I need to think about this and I need to get back with you. If you don't mind being patient, just give me a little bit of time and I'll get back with you on this. It takes wisdom to know when to speak, and it takes wisdom to know what to say. And sometimes we get ourselves in trouble by shooting from the hip. James 1:19, know this, my beloved brothers, let every person be quick to hear, slow to speak, slow to anger. Sometimes we get this flipped around, don't we? Oftentimes we are quick to anger, and we're quick to speak, and we're slow if we listen at all. You and I need to listen to each other. Communication, the biggest part of it involves listening carefully. Listening to your mate. If you love your mate, if you love your children, you need to listen. And be able to pick up on those subtleties, maybe sometimes, about what they're saying. And bear in mind that there's also the nonverbal communication, there's the nonverbal communication, there's body language that can be very helpful in ascertaining what the message is being communicated. You and I need to be quick to hear. We need to be more interested in hearing and listening. Oftentimes we're not listening to what our mate is saying, we're thinking about what our response is going to be. We need to think first about what is being said and then communicate. Filter our words. Engage the mind to think first. And then as we filter our words, are these words going to be helpful? Or are they going to be hurtful? Our words will not be both at the same time. Proverbs 25:11 again, a word fitly spoken is like apples of gold in a setting of silver. This has an appeal. It's something that is attractive. It's very beautiful. A word fitly spoken. Does that describe our communication? Does that describe the words that you speak to your mate? Are you focused on speaking words that are fit, that are appropriate for the time and the moment? Do we use our words as weapons? We spoke earlier about the home. It's not to be a war zone. But all too often we can use our words to attack and to assault each other. We should never use our words. We shouldn't be shouting. We shouldn't be screaming at each other. We shouldn't be raising our voice and using words that are hurtful. Some words are very sharp. Words that are able to penetrate and to scar the emotions in the heart. David, the psalmist penned in Psalm 57:4, my soul is in the midst of lions. I lie down amid fiery beasts. The children of man, whose teeth are spears and arrows, whose tongues are sharp swords. Does that describe your tongue? You have a sharp tongue that pierces those who hear your message. we've said sticking stones will break my bones, but words, oh, they never hurt me. It's a lie. It is a lie. The tongue. So we can use our words as weapon. We can cut. In James 3:5, James describes the tongue this way. It is a small member, yet it boasts of great things. How great a forest is set ablaze by such a small fire. You and I have a question tonight to ask ourselves. Are we an arsonist? Or are we firemen? See, our words will either set the blaze, burn down the forest, or we can be a fireman. We can use words that soothe, that calm, and that cause the wrath and whatever to dissipate. The tongue, it's a small member, but it's very destructive. It can be. Are you and I we use our tongues again in another destructive way? Sometimes we say, sometimes it can be, we have a competitive nature. Sometimes it may be early in our marriage, we want to have the upper hand on the mate. We want to say, we've got this mentality, we may not express it verbally, but I've got to be right. Pride. I've got to be right. I'm going to prove to you that I'm right. I've got to win. I've got to win. I've got to have my way, and I'm going to fight to the bitter end. I'm going to have the last say. It doesn't matter what you say. I'm always thinking of something to say to retort. I'm going to have a response to you. See, are you and I a gladiator, or are we a negotiator? Are you and I battling each other with our words? See, when we're in battle, we can't win. No one is going to win when you're fighting with words. And so we need to guard our words. Guard our words. Jesus teaches that our words reflect the state of our heart. And so, what words spring forth from our mouth are an indicator of what's on the inside. Let's also think tonight about emotions. Our emotions. We're going to think about a couple especially. There's others that could be addressed, but we're going to talk about two. And first of all, we're going to think about anger. The danger of anger. In Proverbs chapter 15, verse 18, as we think about the danger of anger, the Bible says, a hot-tempered man stirs up strife, but he who is slow to anger quiets contention. I don't know, I can't speak for you in your home, but I think that we've got to be careful about continuing the cycle, generation after generation of anger. Sometimes we pass it on. Sometimes we hold anger in our hearts. Sometimes we have hatred in our hearts. In my research for this lesson, it was pointed out that, for instance, toward your mate, the mate may not be the object of your anger. The mate may not be, or the children, may not be the object of your anger or hatred. But because that is in there, because it is in your heart, it is going to negatively impact your relationship with your mate. Anger and hatred is like a cancer, and it will consume you, and it will negatively impact your relationship with your mate, even if that person is not the object of your anger. And so we've got to get anger and wrath and malice out, just like the Bible teaches us to do. There was a young woman. She grew up in a home where her father was angry. And it would be supper time, be in the kitchen. I don't know what it was that set him off. Maybe supper was late about getting there. Maybe he was hungry and it wasn't on the table at the right time. And he bangs his fist on the table, and the plates and the utensils just jump off, dance off the table, and come back down. And it brought fear into her heart. And as she grew older, she said, I don't want to marry a man like that. I don't want to marry a man whose heart is filled with anger. And so, by and by, she meets this young man. And he was so pleasant. He was so, conciliatory, and she fell in love with him. And they married. And it was just a few months down the way that something set him off. And like her father years before, he banged on the table, and the utensils and the plates come off the table and crashed back down, and she thought, I've married a man just like my father. Men, anger is not a sign of manhood. Relationships are destroyed. And I know of one in the present tense of things. A marriage that has fallen on the rocks. And the man expressed to me, I've got an anger problem. And I'm taking it out on my wife. And I'm taking it out on my children. And what, I'm slow to use the word fool, but how foolish he is to allow anger to destroy his beautiful home and family. Anger is destructive. Ephesians 4:26 and 27, the Bible says, be angry and do not sin. Do not let the sun go down on your anger, and give no opportunity to the devil. This is the only passage where there is a seemingly implication that it's okay to be angry. Every other passage in the Old Testament and New Testament warns against it and says, put it away, and that it's sinful. Anger. It's been suggested that anger, it all depends upon the basis of it. Someone is treated unfairly. There's injustice. That is something that stirs what might be described as righteous indignation. I'm angry because they was mistreated. But when we become angry over selfishness, when selfishness is the motivation of our anger, that's wrong. Be angry. There's a warning here. Do not sin. And then also the verse 26, address it. Deal with it. Remove it. Let not the sun go down on your anger. Don't go to bed. Don't go to sleep angry. Whether it's with your mate, your children, your parents, your in-laws, whoever. Don't go to bed angry against somebody. Deal with it. Resolve it. Reconcile. Verse 27, give no opportunity to the devil. If you don't address it, you don't get rid of it, you are giving the devil an opportunity to gain the upper hand. You see, when we become angry for selfish reasons, we're going to sin. We're going to sin somehow. Retaliation, speaking words that are unkind, we're going to respond in a negative way and sin against God and that person, all because we allowed anger to build and to control us. James 1:19, know this, my beloved brothers, again, let every man be quick to hear, slow to speak, slow to anger. Verse 20, for the anger of man does not produce the righteousness of God. You and I are to be about living godly, righteous lives. And anger is not an emotion that promotes godliness. Anger does not produce the righteousness of God. So do you and I, do we want to be approved in the eyes of God? We've got to control anger. You know what happened with Cain and Abel, Genesis 4:5-8. When we're angry, we're out of control. We do things that we ordinarily wouldn't do, as exhibited by Cain. Verse 5-8 of Genesis 4. But for Cain, his offering, he had no regard. God didn't. Cain was very angry. His face fell. The Lord said to Cain, why are you angry? Why has your face fallen? If you do well, will you not be accepted? If you do not do well, sin is crouching at the door. It's desirous for you, but you must rule over it. Cain needed to rule over his anger. Cain spoke to his brother Abel. They were out in the field, and because of his anger, because of his jealousy, he rose up against his brother and killed him. People do stupid things because of anger. And you know firsthand. You've done it. You've said things, you've done things because you failed to exercise self-control in a moment where the emotion of anger took over. But love is another emotion that will answer that. It is the remedy. You and I are taught in Ephesians 5:25-28 as husbands that we're to exercise or demonstrate the love of Christ toward our mate. Husbands, love your wives, even as Christ loved the church and gave himself up for her, that he might sanctify her, having cleansed her by the washing of water with the word. So he might present the church himself in splendor, without spot or wrinkle or any such thing, that she might be holy without blemish. In the same way, husbands should love their wives as their own bodies. He who loves his wife loves himself. Love is the answer. We've got to be consistent. Love is not something that you turn off like water at the spigot on one moment, off the next. Depend upon the circumstances. You're familiar with 1 Corinthians 13:4-7, love. Here, listen to the description of love. And this is how you and I are to relate to others in our relationships. Love is patient. Love is kind. Love does not envy or boast. It's not arrogant. Love is not rude. Love does not insist on its own way. It is not irritable or resentful. It does not rejoice at wrongdoing, but rejoices with the truth. Love bears all things, believes all things, hopes all things, endures all things. There is nothing in all the world like love. And you and I are to fill our heart with love instead of anger. We're to fill our heart with love rather than hate. When we think about love, some things that we sometimes do, sometimes we make accusations. Sometimes we're hypercritical with one another. Sometimes we continually complain. We blame. Sometimes there's name-calling and the use of sarcasm to hurt, to belittle. Love doesn't do these kind of things. Not today. Not tomorrow. Never. So you and I, we need to guard our emotions. It's been said that women always respond better to acceptance and approval than criticism. I suppose that could be said of all of us. I suppose that could be said of our children. I think that could be said of us as husbands, men. We would much rather hear words of kindness and acceptance than bitter criticism. We need to guard our emotions. What's our objective, brethren? What are we trying to accomplish in our homes, in our lives, in our relationships? Do we speak words to build up or to destroy? Think with me for just a moment. Let's suppose that you're building a new house. It's coming along, sheetrock's coming up, and someone gets into the house overnight and does some vandalizing. They come in with a sledgehammer, they start beating and banging. Got a new door, and there's a glass mirror on the bathroom, and there's a chandelier, and everything they can get, they're just slinging that sledgehammer and just destroying everything that they can find. And I want to ask you, if that happened to you, how would you feel about that? You'd be upset, wouldn't you? You'd be distraught because someone has come into your home and has made such destruction. Yet sometimes that's what we do. Each other. Take the sledgehammer and we beat each other up. Jesus says in Mark 3:25, if a house is divided against itself, that house will not be able to stand. And so you and I, we need to really evaluate this situation. Is my home divided? And if it is, what can I do to unite it? What can we do to bring it back together? I'm not going to destroy my home. We read a moment ago, Jesus said, or the Bible says that a man who loves his wife loves himself. If I love myself, I want my marriage and my relationships with my children and every other relationship for that matter, I want it to not just survive, I want it to thrive. And so I'm going to be doing what I can to nurture. The expression is used in Ephesians 5 about nourishing and cherishing the wife, even as the Lord does the church. When you and I nourish and cherish our mate, that relationship that bond is going to grow stronger. It's going to thrive. I'm not here. I don't know about you. I think I know about you, but we're not here to destroy each other. And what am I going to accomplish if I destroy my mate? If I destroy that bond, what have I accomplished? What's our objective, brethren? It needs to be to help one another go to heaven. Our objective should be to go to heaven and to help each other go. The mate, our children, everyone around us that we love and care so dearly. Husbands, live your wives in an understanding way. Well, sometimes we really fail in that, don't we? Live with your mate in an understanding way, showing honor to the woman as the weaker vessel, since they are heirs with you of the grace of life, so that your prayers be not hindered. You and I cultivate a relationship with our mate and with our children that we can pray together. If you and I are fussing and fighting like cats and dogs, how do we pray together? It's not going to happen, is it? Let's look at a suggestion or two. You and I in relationships. I'm not talking about biblical principles here. I'm not talking about morals. But in areas where we can, we need to find a way to compromise. And I want to think about Abram for just a moment in Genesis 13, 8 through 9. Abram and Lot. Notice the spirit of Abram here in this connection as he thinks, as we see this relationship, we got a family relationship here. We got a man and his nephew. Abram says to Lot, get this, let there be no strife, I pray thee, between me and thee, and between my herdmen and thy herdmen. Why? For we be brethren. Listen to the spirit. Listen to the heart of Abram. This is his nephew. This is not his wife. This is not his children. He says, let there be no strife between you and me because we're brethren, because we're family. May you and I join in the spirit of Abram tonight and say to our mates, to our children, to our parents, let there be no strife between you and me because we are heirs together of the grace of life. God has joined us together. We are family. We're not here to destroy each other. Look at Abram, what he does here. As he proposes a workable, reasonable, sacrificial solution. Is not the whole land before you? Separate yourself, I pray thee, from me, if thou wilt. Take the left hand, and I will go to the right. Or if you depart to the right hand, I will go to the left. He is showing, it's the principle here. I'm not suggesting that we separate and divorce for the sake of what we're talking about here. But the principle is this. He gave a solution to his nephew. Abram, this was something that was cut into his pocketbook. This was something that was going to affect the bottom line. But Abram had a heart that said, no, it's not worth it. The strife, the conflict, it's not worth it. You are my nephew. We are brothers. You and I there's a conflict. There's a disagreement. Why don't we spend our time and our minds together working out an agreeable solution? And then we need to pray. What wonders will take place in our homes, in our relationships, when we spend time to pray, both individually and with the people under consideration, our mate, our children, our parents, etc. We should pray things like this. Wake up in the morning, maybe before we get our foot on the floor, or maybe before our mate awakens, and we know that there's been some issues, there's been some tension, and maybe I haven't done so well in the hours and days leading up to this, but you and I, we need to be thankful. We need to be thoughtful and cognizant of this need to pray and to ask for God's help. Help me avoid the pitfalls that may come before me today. Satan's working. Help me to see. Help me to avoid the pitfalls. Help me have the Spirit of Christ in my interactions with my mate, with my children, my parents, with my in-laws. Help me to have the Spirit of Christ. If you and I are cognizant and praying to God for help, to have the right spirit, and then something is said or something is done that ordinarily would trigger and set us off, then we've got an advantage because we're already asking for God's help to be careful what we say and how we respond. Lord, help me not to be selfish in demanding my way all the time. Help me to be thoughtful. Help me to be compassionate for my mate and others in my family. Help me, Father. I have some weakness here. I haven't been doing so well, but I know that I can do better with your help. And then thirdly, grow spiritually. If you and I will grow spiritually, it will help us in our relationships with each other. The fruit of the Spirit is love, joy, peace, patience, kindness, goodness, faithfulness, gentleness, self-control. These are things that you and I need in our relationship. They're going to happen accidentally. You and I are growing spiritually. We're going to interact with each other in a thoughtful way. We live in the Spirit. Are you and I under the guidance and control of the Spirit? Are we allowing God to lead us through life in our relationships? Let us keep in step with the Spirit. Let us not become conceited, provoking one another. That could be a problem in the home, can't it? Provoking, we kind of needle. No, it's not a game. Envying one another. You and I can grow in relationships. It's got to be intentional. The home, what a blessing. The relationship that we share in Christ in the home. Let's grow together.